The world of Kravenar IV was a bleeding wound upon the stars. Once its skies had shimmered with the auroras of the segmentum obscurus bands of emerald light cast from the planet's magnetic storms. Now they burned red, streaked with the smoke of dying cities and the roaring descent of orc rocks plummeting like iron comets. Every impact cracked the planet's crust, sending shockwaves through hive and valley alike. The Imperial Guard had dug their trenches into the mud and ash, their banners soaked and tattered, their prayers reduced to muttered fragments drowned by the thunder of artillery. From the command bastion atop the shattered ridge of Fort Gravenhold, Colonel Mervalen stared through Auspex lenses at the horizon. It was no longer a horizon at all, only motion. The orc tide rolled like a living ocean, green bodies surging through the mist, banners of crude glyphs waving high. They came in impossible numbers, their war cries merging into a single primal roar that turned the air thick with fear. Behind them lumbered their war machines, ramshackle gargants stitched together with iron and sacrilege, powered by engines that screamed like dying gods. Valen spoke without turning, his voice a rasp filtered through the rebreather. They don't stop. Emperor preserve us, they never stop. A Vox officer clutched the side of the comms console, its dials glowing weakly amid the shaking walls. No word from command, sir. The last transmission from orbit said reinforcements were 3 days out. Then silence. 3 days, Valen muttered. He lowered the Auspex, watching the orcs crest a burning ridge. We'll be bones in the dirt by then. The soldiers nearby made the sign of the Aquila. Many had done it so often their knuckles were rubbed raw, the gesture worn smooth by desperation. The chaplain continued his litany, his voice hoarse but unwavering. Fear not the alien, the heretic, the mutant, immutant. For the Emperor's light is with us. A shell struck the bastion wall, drowning his words in a blossom of fire and shrieking shrapnel. The chaplain vanished into red mist. Dust and blood coated the control room as alarms wailed. Valen hauled himself up from the floor, deafened but alive. Through the smoke he saw the battlefield beyond, saw an ocean of orcs surging through trenches, tearing men apart with axes and bare hands, laughing as they died. The sky darkened. A shadow passed overhead, immense and wrong. Valen staggered to the viewport and froze. Above the carnage, a new light was blooming in the heavens, neither flame nor shipborne descent. It pulsed like a wound in reality itself. The clouds around it twisted and folded inward, forming a spiral of blinding energy that screamed without sound. Vox lines crackled with static as if the machine spirits themselves recoiled. Warp anomaly detected. The tech priest chanted, his mechadendrites twitching. A pattern unclassified. Coordinates directly above our position. Valen turned toward the soldiers. All batteries redirect fire. Nothing gets through that breach. The order went unheeded for a heartbeat too long, and then the rift opened fully. Reality tore apart in a storm of light and distortion. Men fell to their knees, their eyes bleeding as the air thickened with raw psychic pressure. The orcs themselves paused mid-charge, roaring and pointing skyward as something fell from the wound in the heavens. A figure wrapped in emerald flame, tumbling through the sky like a star cast from the void. It struck the battlefield with the force of an orbital bombardment. The shockwave leveled the nearest trench line, scattering orcs and humans alike. Silence followed for the first time in hours, heavy, trembling, waiting. Then the dust began to clear. Valen staggered to the viewport again. Through the fractured lenses, he saw the crater. Yawn. At its center stood a figure, massive and unmoving. Smoke curled from the impact zone. Armor blackened and scarred gleamed in the dim light, edges glowing faintly with internal heat. The figure's visor burned green like hellfire trapped behind glass. In one hand it held a weapon that seemed both crude and divine, a shotgun built for execution, not battle. In the other, a chain blade hummed softly, eager and hungry. "Is it one of ours?" the Vox officer whispered. Valen didn't answer. Even from here he could feel the wrongness of it. The presence radiated fury, not devotion. It was not a soldier of the Emperor, nor a servant of chaos. It was something older, simpler, a force of destruction given human shape. Below, the orcs howled their approval. Hundreds charged the crater, bellowing WAAAGH as they fired wildly. Bolts and slugs filled the air, kicking up dirt and fire. For a moment, the figure didn't move. Then, without warning, it surged forward. The chainblade roared to life. The first orc exploded in a spray of gore. The second was crushed by a single blow to the chest. The figure moved with terrifying precision, faster than anything Valen had ever seen, each motion born of hatred honed into discipline. Bullets struck him and ricocheted away as though the universe itself refused to slow his purpose. "By the throne," Valen whispered. "What is that?" The Vox officer crossed himself. "A demon, sir." "No," Valen said, his voice hollow. "No demon fights them." Below, the battlefield was becoming a slaughterhouse. Orcs fled, stumbling over their dead as the figure advanced unrelenting. For every blow he landed, a dozen fell. The ground itself shuddered beneath the violence. When at last the guns fell silent, the crater burned green against the dusk. The figure stood alone, surrounded by ruin. No orc still breathed within 100 meters. Then the sky crackled again. The warp wound pulsed once more, but smaller now, contained as though closing. Yet before it vanished, a whisper seemed to slither through the air, reaching the ears of all who remained alive. A voice neither human nor divine, speaking in a tongue that made the blood run cold. "The Slayer walks among them." And then it was gone, leaving only the echo of distant thunder and the rhythmic hum of a chain blade cooling in the dusk. The Imperial guards stared in awe and terror as the stranger turned his gaze toward the fortress. Valen felt it before he saw it. The weight of judgment, the promise of more blood to come. The war had changed. Something far worse than orcs had arrived on Cravenar 4. The battlefield still smoked from the storm of his arrival. Where Doomguy had landed, the earth itself seemed scorched with symbols no mortal mind could decipher, circles of glassed soil, veins of molten rock pulsating faintly like arteries feeding something unseen beneath. The air was heavy with the metallic taste of ozone and blood. Around the crater, Imperial soldiers remained frozen, their lasguns slack in trembling hands. None dared move closer, as though the stranger's presence alone could unmake them. Colonel Valen's voice rasped over the Vox, hoarse and uncertain. "All units, hold your line. Do not engage the entity. Emperor, protect us. Keep your distance." Yet his words were drowned beneath the distant thrum of the Orc horde, regrouping after its first devastating rout. Even the greenskins, reckless as beasts, now hesitated. The warlord Grub, Nash Skullcrack, a mountain of iron and muscle, stared through his crude magnifying lens and snarled. "A dat Hume fights like Gork's fist. I'll have his skull for me banner." Down below, Doomguy moved. Slowly, methodically, he reached for the combat shotgun slung across his back. The weapon hummed as it reconnected to the suit's power feeds, runes along its barrel flickering with faint hellfire. He checked the chamber, mechanical habit, ritual precision, and began to walk. His boots crunched over broken helmets, crushed bone and shell casings that still glowed red. To him, this world was no different from countless others he'd bled upon. The air was thick with demonic residue, though he sensed it was not hell's, but something eerily similar, corrupted in a different way. The Praetor suit's HUD flickered. Energy readings scrolled across his visor. Warp anomalies, psychic resonance, anomalous gravitational shifts. His systems tried to classify them, failed and defaulted to a single word burned in red across the display: hostile. He looked toward the horizon, where the orcs gathered again under banners of crude teeth and fire. They were not demons, not exactly, but their fury, their chaotic hunger for violence resonated with the same malignant rhythm. Doomguy's grip tightened on the shotgun's handle. It didn't matter what name this new hell wore. He would end it all the same. Above, lightning split the clouds once more. The rift in the heavens had not sealed completely. Instead, it lingered, widening in slow, deliberate pulses as if breathing. Invisible tendrils of warp energy spread through the sky, unseen by the human eye but felt by the soul. Psychers across Cravenar screamed in their sleep or clawed their eyes out in madness. The ecclesiarchy priest took it as a sign of divine wrath. The orcs saw it as Gork and Mork's laughter. Doomguy saw only an open door. Valen descended from the bastion with a retinue of guardsmen, fear carving lines into his face. The closer he came, the more his auspex readings failed. Vox signals warped into whispers, voices that were not human speaking his name, promising salvation through annihilation. By the time he reached the crater's edge, he was trembling. "Identify yourself," he shouted, though his voice cracked. The stranger did not respond. He continued his slow march across the field toward the rising orc tide. A centaur demon, one of Valen's lieutenants, muttered, "Whatever he is, he fights for us." Valen wanted to believe it. But as Doomguy passed a burning shrine to the Emperor, the candles within snuffed out, their flames extinguished by his proximity. No relic or holy symbol reacted to him, not in reverence nor rejection, It was as though the universe refused to acknowledge him. Further away, Grubnash Skullcrack roared for his knobs to mount up. The Ork war engines coughed to life, spewing black smoke that blotted out what little light remained. "Get the trucks movin'. We'll show dis silent git how orcs fight proper." He slammed his fist into a nearby boy's skull, crushing it to paste as laughter erupted around him. "The WAAAGH!" Drums began anew, rolling thunder shaking the ground as tens of thousands of orcs advanced once more. Valen raised his macro binoculars, watching in horror as the green tide surged toward the lone figure. "He's one man," he whispered. "He'll be torn apart." But Doomguy didn't slow. The HUD painted hundreds of red signatures across his visor, marking targets, calculating ballistics, prioritizing by distance. His breathing was steady, measured. When the first orc fired, he moved, impossibly fast, a blur of violence and precision. The shotgun boomed like a thunderclap. The first 3 orcs disintegrated into mist. Another tried to charge, only for Doomguy's fist to crush its skull with a wet crack. Every movement was an execution, each kill an echo of ancient fury refined by centuries of war. The orcs screamed and fired wildly, laughing even as they died. "Well, this one's a fight worth fightin'," Grubnash bellowed, spitting oil and blood. "Keep shootin', you runty gits." From the ridge, the Imperial soldiers watched in awe. The stranger tore through the horde like a living weapon, using corpses as shields, leaping from burning wrecks into fresh mobs. Every spent shell clinked against the earth like a hymn to annihilation. His armor was painted in blood, his visor blazing green through the smoke. Valen lowered his binoculars. "At the Emperor's mercy," he breathed. "He's winning. A winning. A winning." The tech priest hissed, mechadendrites twitching. "This is not victory. This is purge." He was right. There was no strategy, no command, only destruction. Doomguy fought until no orc within sight still drew breath, until the field was silent except for the wind and the crackle of fire. Mo. When at last he stopped, he stood surrounded by the dead, his armor drenched in gore, the chainsaw humming softly like a beast waiting for its next meal. But above him, the rift changed. The light shifted from crimson to sickly violet. Something stirred within, the shape of wings, the echo of distant laughter. The smell of sulfur mingled with incense and rot. The orcs who still lived began to shriek, clawing at their eyes as reality bent around them. Doomguy turned his head toward the sky. He didn't flinch. He had seen hell before, countless times. Whatever waited beyond that rift, he would face it the same way he had faced all things, without fear, without mercy. The clouds rippled, folding inward. The warp tore wider, and for an instant the silhouette of something colossal loomed within the void, horned, winged, burning. Its voice echoed across the planet like a sermon to madness. Another world, another hunt, another slaughter. Then the light collapsed, the voice gone as quickly as it came. The rift shrank to a single point, pulsing like a dying star. Doomguy holstered his shotgun, staring into its fading glow. The war was not over. This world's corruption ran deeper than the monsters he had slain. He turned, his boots grinding ash beneath them, and began walking toward the Imperial lines. Colonel Valen's heart pounded as the figure approached, silent as the grave, haloed by smoke and ruin. Behind them in the distance, Grubnash Skullcrack climbed from the wreckage of his battle tank, wiping blood from his eyes. His tusked grin widened. "That's more like it," he growled. "This ain't just a fight. This is a walk worth rememberin'." And high above, unseen by all, the tear in the veil shimmered faintly once more, as if something vast and patient watched from beyond, waiting for its chance to step through. The stranger walked through the wreckage in silence, a storm of ash swirling around him like incense in a desecrated chapel. Every step left a print of scorched earth. The battlefield had gone still, not from peace but exhaustion. The orcs were dead or scattered, their cries fading into the wastes beyond the ridge. The air hummed faintly, a residue of something unnatural, like a wound in reality that refused to close. Colonel Valen watched his approach from behind the twisted remains of the bastion wall. The man, or whatever he was, moved with the calm inevitability of a machine built for war, yet his presence felt far older, more deliberate. Valen's troops shifted uneasily, lasguns trembling in their grip. The stranger's armor was blackened but intact, its surface carved with ancient sigils and scarred by battles unknown. Across the chestplate, faint crimson veins of energy pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. When he reached the perimeter, a dozen rifles aimed at his head. He stopped, motionless, visor reflecting the frightened faces before him. The silence stretched like a noose until Valen stepped forward. "Identify yourself," he said, his voice taut. "By order of the Astra Militarum, state your allegiance." No response. The stranger's head tilted slightly as though passing the words of a forgotten tongue. Behind the visor there was no sign of emotion, only the cold, distant glow of purpose. Valen swallowed. "You fought the Xenos. You saved my men. If you understand me, nod once." The figure did not nod. The figure did not nod. Instead, he reached slowly to his belt. Every weapon in the trench clicked to ready, but the stranger drew nothing lethal. He retrieved a fragment of metal, warped and half-melted. He held it up for Valen to see. It was the Aquila of the Imperium, torn from a fallen guardsman's armor. The man stared at it for a moment, then crushed it in his fist, the metal shrieking as it folded inwards. He released the shards to the ground and turned away, scanning the horizon. Valen's heart sank. "The throne forgive us," he murmured. "He's no servant of the Emperor." The tech priest beside him murmured binary canticles under his breath. "Unidentified war construct," he whispered. "Warhammer pattern, unknown, energy core, incompatible with human manufacture. The machine spirit within him is silent, or perhaps defiant." Before Valen could answer, the sky split again with the roar of Ork engines. A fresh wave of trucks was thundering through the wasteland, their crude cannons firing blindly into the smoke. Grubnash Skullcrack himself stood atop a battle wagon, bellowing laughter that rolled across the plains. "There he is, boys. Da metal man who kills good. Let's see if he bleeds." Valen shouted to his Vox officer, "All units, defensive positions, prepare to fire." But the stranger didn't wait. Without hesitation, he broke into a run, an unstoppable momentum that made the ground quake beneath his boots. Doomguy moved through the chaos like an executioner fulfilling prophecy. Every orc that dared approach him was torn apart in seconds, arms crushed, skulls shattered, torsos eviscerated by the roaring chain blade. He leapt onto a truck, tore its mounted gun from the frame, and turned it against its riders, the heavy slugs ripping through flesh and armor alike. He didn't speak, didn't slow, didn't look back. To him there was no army, no ally, no enemy, only targets and the endless rhythm of violence. Grubnash saw him coming and grinned, tusks gleaming. "And now that's a fight." He jumped from his wagon, the ground cracking beneath his massive boots. He swung a cleaver the size of a man, sparks bursting as it collided with Doomguy's armor. The impact sent a shockwave across the field, scattering debris and blood. The Slayer didn't stumble. His gauntlet shot forward, striking Grubnash across the jaw. Teeth flew like bullets. The orc staggered, laughed, and swung again. Doomguy ducked, chainsaw flaring to life, the teeth biting deep into the warlord's thigh. Green ichor sprayed in arcs, hissing where it hit the ground. "You fight good, Humie," Grubnash roared, slamming his metal fist into Doomguy's chestplate. "But I fights forever." Doomguy grabbed the orc's arm mid-swing and twisted until bones snapped. The warlord howled, but the sound turned into guttural laughter even as Doomguy drove the chainsaw up through his ribcage. He wrenched it free, splitting the orc in half. The corpse hit the dirt with a wet thud. The horde faltered. The remaining orcs hesitated, and that single moment of confusion was enough. The Imperial lines opened fire, lasguns blazing, missiles screaming through the haze. The combined fury tore through the disorganized horde, reducing it to smoking ruin. When it ended, Doomguy stood amidst a mountain of corpses, his armor drenched in green and red alike. He glanced toward the humans, then up at the sky, where the faint shimmer of the warp tear pulsed again. His visor flickered with readouts, coordinates, power surges, gravitational distortions. Somewhere deep within, the Praetor suit's ancient systems whispered warnings in a forgotten language. To the soldiers, he looked like a statue carved of vengeance, unmoving in the aftermath. Valen approached slowly, lowering his weapon. "You're not of this world," he said quietly, "and yet you fight as though it's yours to defend." Still no reply. Doomguy turned slightly, enough for Valen to see his visor flare brighter for an instant, reflecting the burning wreckage. The colonel felt something primal in that glow, not faith, not reason, but raw purpose. Behind them the sky groaned again, thunder rippling through the clouds. The warp wound pulsed wider, its edges bleeding light into the atmosphere. The priests began to chant in panic, their hymns desperate, hollow. Valen tore his gaze away and looked once more at the stranger. "Whatever brought you here, it's not done with you. Doomguy reloaded his shotgun with a precise click, the sound cutting through the wind like a ritual. He looked toward the horizon where lightning burned green across the clouds. The orcs were broken, but something greater stirred beyond. He could feel it, the pulse of another war, another hell. He started walking again, silent, inexorable. The humans watched him go, unsure whether they'd witnessed salvation or the beginning of damnation. And far above, unseen beyond the veil, something vast moved in the warp, its laughter echoing faintly through the thinning air, amused, curious, waiting. The storm had not ended with Grubnash's death, it had only changed shape. Across the battlefields of Crevenair 4, word spread through the orc warbands like wildfire through dry bone. They spoke of the silent human who had slain their warlord with his bare hands, a creature who neither spoke nor bled, who fought with the fury of the gods themselves. To the green-skinned mind, such tales were never mere rumor, they were revelation. In the days that followed, the surviving mobs gathered across the wastelands, brawling among themselves for leadership until a new voice rose above the chaos. He was called WAAAGH, a warp-touched orc painboy who claimed he'd seen visions of the event from miles away. Visions granted, he insisted, by Gork and Mork themselves. His brain had been opened one too many times by his own surgical saws, yet his words burned with conviction that even the most savage nob could not ignore. I came from Doomguy. WAAAGH bellowed atop a pile of scrap and corpses, his mismatched eyes glowing sickly green. Gork sent him. Or maybe Mork. Don't know which, but he's the biggest, angriest, most fightinest thing we ever seen. He's a test, boys. A test to see who's worthy to join the great WAAAGH in day stars. The mobs roared in agreement, stomping their boots, beating their chests. The psychic energy of their belief surged into the air, thick and electric. The WAAAGH field itself began to change, colors bleeding into the clouds, thunder cracking with laughter that was not entirely physical. WAAAGH's prophecies spread fast. Across the plains, orc mechs began constructing crude idols, massive effigies of Doomguy, wrought from twisted metal and bloodied armor plates, each one more grotesque than the last. They painted him in red and black, with burning green eyes and a roaring chainsaw for a heart. They chanted his name, or what passed for one in their guttural speech, a da burnin' fist, da man of Mork, da one what don't talk but makes you die screamin'. Within the Imperial Bastion, Colonel Valen's forces watched the phenomenon unfold in mounting disbelief. From orbit, Auspex readings confirmed enormous concentrations of orc energy converging toward a single region of the planet. Vox intercepts translated fragments of the greenskin frenzy. The orcs were not retreating, they were worshipping. Valen stood before a cracked hololith display, the green tide pulsing across the map like a spreading infection. "Are they uniting again?" he said quietly. "They've found religion." The tech priest beside him emitted a static hiss of disapproval. "A correction, they have found focus." The warp field generated by such psychic unity could destabilize the entire sector. A meaning? A meaning, Colonel, that the very belief of these Xenos could conjure abominations into existence. As if to punctuate his words, the bastion trembled. Outside, the night sky blazed with unnatural green lightning. Valen staggered to the viewport. Beyond the trenches, miles away, a colossal shape rose on the horizon. It was one of the orc idols, but unlike the others, this one moved. Towering hundreds of meters high, it lumbered forward on piston legs, its body stitched together from tanks, wrecked ships, and bones. Each step shook the ground. "Emperor's light," Valen whispered. "They've built a god." Below, Doomguy was already moving toward it. The figure of myth had no need for orders or understanding. He saw the machine, recognized its monstrous heart, and acted. His boots pounded through the mud, each impact leaving glowing imprints that hissed in the rain. The air thickened around him with residual energy, as if even the warp hesitated to touch him. From the idol's chest, WAAAGH's voice boomed, magnified through crude loudhailers and psychic projection alike. "Ida gods have spoken, Humi. You killed the wrong boss. Gork wants a fight." "And Mork wants a laugh." His cackling echoed through the night. "This world's ours now, and you're the biggest bit of fun we've had in 1,000 years." Bolts of green lightning struck the ground near Doomguy, turning sand to glass. Orc psychers lined the idol's shoulders, channeling raw WAAAGH energy into the war machine's frame. Cannons the size of buildings rotated toward him, charging with blinding light. The first volley hit like the wrath of a god. Explosions swallowed half the battlefield. For a moment it seemed no mortal could survive, but through the smoke Doomguy kept walking. Flames curled around him, licking harmlessly off the praetor armor. His visor glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the beat of his heart. He sprinted into the cratered field, vaulted onto the wreck of a destroyed chimera, and launched himself into the air. The super shotgun boomed twice in rapid succession, each slug tearing through an orc gunner's skull. Then the chain blade ignited, a shriek of hungry metal as he landed upon the idol's base. Sparks rained as he tore open armor plating, climbing like a beast ascending a mountain made of death. Inside, WAAAGH shrieked with manic joy. "He's comin' for us, boys. Don't stop da shootin'. This is da best fight in da galaxy." Orcs poured from the idol's hatches, firing wildly, their laughter mingling with the sound of ripping metal. Doomguy met them in close quarters, reducing them to meat and fragments, climbing higher with every kill. The WAAAGH field crackled around him, reality bending as psychic energy collided with the unyielding force of his will. At the summit he reached the core chamber, a grotesque fusion of flesh and machinery. WAAAGH stood at its center, arms outstretched, his body crackling with green power. "You ain't no saint," the weird boy crooned. "You's one of us, a god of fightin' and killin'. Gork's kin, Mork's favorite. Come on, big man, smile while you burn." Doomguy didn't answer. He drove the chainsaw through the psychic engine. The resulting detonation lit the heavens. The idol collapsed in on itself, molten iron spilling across the field. The shockwave leveled entire hills, silencing every chant, every drum. When the dust cleared, the god machine was gone, only a smoking crater remained. At its edge stood Doomguy, unmoved, his armor steaming, visor gleaming through the haze. The orcs that survived watched in awe, their primitive minds struggling to comprehend defeat. Then slowly, one began to laugh. Another joined. Soon the entire host was roaring again, mad, joyous, unbroken. To them, this was proof beyond doubt. The silent warrior wasn't their enemy. He was a god who had tested them and survived. And somewhere deep within the warp, two enormous unseen beings, Gork and Mork themselves, roared with laughter that shook the stars. The crater still burned like a wound in the world. Rivers of molten metal flowed where the idol of Gork and Mork had stood, and the air shimmered with toxic heat. Even from miles away, the scent of scorched oil and flesh carried on the wind. The storm that had followed the detonation rolled across Kravenor 4 like a curse, black clouds threaded with veins of green lightning, thunder echoing like the laughter of dead gods. Doomguy stood at the center of the destruction, motionless. The praetor armor hissed with venting steam, its systems recalibrating after the energy overload. His visor reflected the blazing horizon, scanning for movement, for sound, for purpose. The silence that followed battle was always the same, a void waiting to be filled with another scream. Behind him, the Imperial Guard crept closer, wary as wolves near fire. Colonel Valen led them through the wreckage, his men whispering prayers under their breath. To walk toward this figure after what they had seen felt less like courage and more like blasphemy. By the throne, one trooper muttered, "He's still alive." "Alive?" another whispered. "You call that alive?" Valen silenced them with a raised hand. He approached until the heat forced him to stop. "Whoever you are," he called out, voice cracking through the wind. "You've saved this world more than once already. But I need to know, are you with us?" The figure didn't answer. Instead, Doomguy turned slightly, his visor locking on Valen. A faint hum filled the air as the armor's targeting system flickered, identifying, analyzing, discarding. Then, without a word, he turned his gaze back to the horizon. Valen's grip tightened on his last pistol, though he knew it would be useless. "You can't fight alone forever," he said quietly. "Whatever brought you here, the Imperium fights the same war. You could—" He stopped. The stranger had moved. It was subtle, a small tilt of the helmet, a shift in posture, but something in it silenced Valen completely. It was not defiance nor agreement. It was understanding and rejection. Doomguy reached for his shotgun, checking its chamber. The motion was fluid, mechanical. As he reloaded, his gaze caught something in the dirt, a fallen bolter, its owner long since reduced to ash. He picked it up, weighing it in one hand. The weapon was heavier than it appeared, ornate and brutal, the aquila engraved along its casing. To him it was a crude relic of another age, a cousin to his own tools of death. Yet it felt familiar. He aimed toward the horizon and fired once. The sound was deeper than his shotgun's bark, a heavy thud that echoed across the plains. The recoil was satisfying, the result efficient. He tossed the weapon aside, its sanctity irrelevant. "Ye saints preserve us," Valen muttered. "He learns our weapons as easily as he breathes." But there was no time for awe. A low rumble shook the earth. From the northern ridges came the grinding of engines, the return of the orcs, not broken but reborn in fury. The death of their idol had not quelled their hunger, it had ignited it. Under banners smeared with blood and soot, thousands marched again. They were not led by warlords now, but by faith, their faith in him. A silent god fights again. The mob screamed, firing their guns into the air. Wajra de Burning Fist. The Imperial's Vox channels erupted with overlapping reports. Multiple contacts, North Sector, tens of thousands. "We can't hold the trenches, requesting immediate orbital," he denied, Valen snapped. "Exterminatus is still locked down by the Inquisition. We hold until we can't." He turned to the stranger. "If you're staying, then fight with us. If you're leaving, then you damn us all." Doomguy said nothing. Doomguy. His visor glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. He holstered the shotgun, pulled his chainsaw free, and revved it once. The sound cut through the wind like an ancient hymn. That was answer enough. The orcs came screaming through the smoke, a green tidal wave. The Imperial line opened fire, bolters, lasguns, heavy stubbers, everything they had. The air became a storm of tracer fire and shrapnel. Doom drew without hesitation, charging ahead of the guard like a spear point of flesh and iron. The first orc met him with a roar and a power axe. Doomguy ducked beneath the swing, drove his shoulder into its gut, and tore the creature in half with the chainsaw's teeth. Blood fountained across his visor. He turned, parried another blow, fired point blank into a third's chest. Every movement was rhythm. Kill, reload, kill again. His hands worked with a ritual's precision, his mind empty of everything but purpose. The guardsmen followed his lead, inspired by the impossible. They advanced behind him, shouting the Emperor's name even as they saw something far greater, something purer. To them, this was not a man. This was the embodiment of vengeance itself. Hours bled into one another. The field became a nightmare of smoke and ruin. Bolters overheated, lasguns burned out, and still the orcs came. Doomguy's armor was cracked, dented, smeared with filth, but he did not slow. He tore ammunition from fallen soldiers, used orc weapons when his own ran dry. At one point, he ripped a mounted heavy bolter from its tripod and carried it like a toy, mowing down scores at a time. When the last orc fell, silence returned once more. The ground was black with blood. The Imperial banners hung tattered but standing. Valen limped through the wreckage, barely recognizing his own battlefield. He found Doomguy kneeling beside a broken bolter, reloading it from a pile of spent shells, as if the weapon itself were learning from him. "You've done more in one day than we have in a campaign," Valen said softly. "If the Emperor saw you—" Doomguy turned, visor flickering with the faint reflection of the burning sky. The words died in Valen's throat. No mortal devotion or divine will burn behind that gaze. Only fury, only duty, only duty. Above them, thunder rolled again. Different this time, sharper, colder. The warp tear that had scarred the heavens was flaring anew, its edges bleeding crimson instead of green. And somewhere within that storm, something vast and ancient was watching, taking note of this mortal who defied even the impossible. Doomguy looked skyward, the glow of his visor meeting the light of the rift. The wind howled around him, carrying with it the scent of fire and ozone. The next war was already coming. By dawn, Kravenar 4 was quiet. The kind of silence that comes not from peace, but from exhaustion, after the killing ends and the air itself forgets how to breathe. Smoke rose from the plains like incense from 1,000 censers, drifting toward the broken spires of the Basilica Imperialis. What had once been the spiritual heart of the planet now stood half-collapsed, its golden aquilus blackened, its statues of saints cracked and hollow-eyed. Yet inside those ruins, something new had begun. The survivors of the battle, guardsmen, civilians, and even some of the Mechanicus had gathered there, drawn by instinct, fear, or faith. They whispered of the nameless warrior who had come from the sky. To some, he was an angel of the Emperor, to others a demon bound by divine chains. Whatever he was, his name had already become legend. They called him the Silent Saint. At the center of the nave stood a preacher of the ecclesiarchy, Confessor Malshan, once the planet's spiritual governor, now a gaunt figure in torn robes and soot-streaked armor. His voice carried through the broken halls, amplified by the cracked Vox speakers still clinging to life. "Brothers and sisters," he cried, "the Emperor has not forsaken us. When the green tide came, he sent his wrath made flesh. When the heretics doubted, he showed his power through the blood of the unbelievers. The crowd roared its assent. Some knelt, some wept, some wept. Guardsmen raised their lasguns in salute, chanting the Emperor's name. Malsun's eyes gleamed feverishly. He walks among us even now, the saint of fury, the wordless blade, the angel without halo. His silence is the voice of our salvation. From the shadows near the transept, Colonel Valen watched uneasily. He had seen this before, the birth of faith twisted by desperation. The people needed hope, and they would shape it from whatever they could grasp, even if it was a weapon made of flesh and fury. Doomguy had not spoken a single word, yet already his legend grew faster than fire in dry fields. Valen turned to the tech priest beside him. "You're certain he's still here?" "Affirmative," the priest replied, his vox tones cold and metallic. "Her thermal readings place the anomaly in the lower catacombs. It appears to have refused all attempts at contact. It consumes no sustenance, requires no sleep. The machine spirits recoil from its presence." Valen's gaze lingered on the altar. "And yet these people worship him. A faith," the priest said simply, "is a contagion. The stronger the will, the faster it spreads." In the catacombs below, Doomguy stood in darkness lit only by the dim glow of his visor. The chamber had once been a reliquary, its walls lined with ossuaries and rusting icons. Now it served as his shelter, though he neither rested nor prayed. Around him, incense smoke curled through the cracks in the stone. He ignored it. The faint hum of his armor's systems was the only sound, a heartbeat of steel and vengeance. He had been repairing his weapons, cleaning the bolter he'd salvaged, studying its mechanisms as if dissecting a corpse. The craftsmanship was primitive but effective, efficient in its brutality, the kind of tool made by men who fought wars without ever understanding why. Above him, the echo of the confessor's sermon reached faintly through the stone. The words meant nothing to him, yet something in the tone, zeal, hunger, fear disguised as reverence, was familiar. He had heard it before, in other worlds, in other tongues. Every time men saw the abyss and mistook the things standing at its edge for salvation. A faint tremor rippled through the ground. His visor flared, detecting movement outside the catacombs. A moment later, the heavy door creaked open, and Confessor Malsun entered, flanked by torchbearers. The preacher carried a censer of burning myrrh, the smoke coiling thick around his head like a halo. "In my lord," he said reverently, bowing low. "They speak of you in every corner of the city. The Emperor's light shines through your deeds. You are proof his hand still moves." Doomguy didn't move. The visor tracked the man's every gesture. Malsun continued, undeterred. "I have seen the signs. The sky burns, the earth trembles, and the heretics die in your shadow. You need not speak, for your silence is his will. The people will follow. The ecclesiarchy will proclaim your sainthood across the sector. Kravenar will become a new shrine world." The silence deepened. Doomguy holstered the bolter, his movements deliberate. Then he stepped closer, and for the first time, Malsun's voice faltered. The air seemed to grow heavier, pressing against his lungs. "You will lead them," the confessor whispered. "You must. The Emperor demands it." The visor's green glow filled the priest's vision. For a heartbeat, he saw his own reflection within it, small, trembling mortal. Doomguy raised his hand and pressed it lightly to the priest's chest. Not in violence, but rejection. Then he turned away, returning to the dark. Malsun staggered back, clutching his robes. The torchbearers fled, frightened by what they didn't understand. The priest looked once more into the shadows, and for the first time he doubted. Yet when he emerged into the basilica, he raised his arms once again. "He has blessed us," Malsun cried, voice breaking with fervor. "He has chosen silence as his vow. We are sanctified by his wrath." We are sanctified by his wrath. The crowd erupted anew, falling to their knees. Valen felt the words like knives in his gut. The man had twisted a refusal into divinity. And as the masses chanted the silent saint's name, the warp above the planet rippled again, drawn not by violence this time, but by faith. Something vast and patient stirred in response to their worship, like a predator scenting blood in the water. Unseen in the catacombs, Doomguy looked upward. The visor flickered once as if in warning. He could feel it, the gathering of unseen eyes, the slow turning of the universe toward him once more. Peace, he knew, would never come. The sermons had spread faster than any fire. Within a single week, the tale of the silent saint had reached every remaining hive and outpost across Kravenar 4. Vox transmissions carried prayers instead of orders. Soldiers went into battle, reciting his name. Even the dying whispered it as they bled out, believing their sacrifice had purpose again. But in the quiet between signals, a different transmission pierced the void, encrypted, coded, and stamped with the sigil of the Holy Ordos. An inquisitorial vessel entered the system under silent warp translation, its black hull swallowing the stars. The ship bore no heraldry, no lights, only the faint shimmer of its Geller field as it slid into orbit above the broken world. From its sanctified decks came a single message to the planet's command bastion. All Imperial operations suspended. Inquisitor Kael Dravian assumes authority. Non-compliance is heresy. Colonel Valen stood in the command chamber when the Inquisitor arrived. The man was tall, severe, his eyes pale and without warmth. His armor was matte black and unadorned, save for the sigil of the Inquisition etched over his heart. He walked with the deliberate calm of one accustomed to judgment, his cloak whispering across the floor like the turning of a page. 2 acolytes followed in his wake, one a psyker bound in silver chains, the other a servo skull humming softly as it recorded every word. "A colonel," Dravian said, voice as measured as it was merciless. "You have a problem." Valen straightened. "We've held the line against the Orcs, Excellency. The enemy is fractured. Our defenses—" "I am not speaking of the Xenos." Dravian's gaze cut through the dim light. "I speak of your saint." The word felt like a curse in his mouth. Valen hesitated. "The silent one. He's not of us, but he saved thousands." The people believed too easily. Dravian's tone never rose, yet every syllable carried the weight of accusation. The faith without control breeds chaos. "You have a warrior walking among you who answers to no command, obeys no creed, and inspires worship outside ecclesiarchal sanction. Zan, that, Colonel, is the beginning of a heresy." Valen bit back his reply. He had seen what Doomguy could do, seen him stand against armies, tear apart monsters that had haunted the planet for years. Heresy or not, without him Kravenar would already be ash. The psyker shuddered suddenly, gasping. His chains rattled. "He burns," the wretch whispered, eyes rolling white. "They're the one they call saint. He burns the warp around him. A silence that screams. The sea recoils from him. It does not want him here." Dravian turned to him sharply. "Control yourself. Control yourself." But the psyker only wept, blood trickling from his nose. There's nothing there. No soul. No thread to the Emperor's light. Just rage, a cage full of thunder. For the first time Valen saw uncertainty flicker behind Dravian's eyes. "Then he is not a man," the Inquisitor said. "He is a weapon. And every weapon must have an origin." By nightfall they descended into the basilica. The hymns of the ecclesiarchy echoed through the shattered halls, their voices rising in fanatical harmony. The confessor had turned faith into fever. Hundreds of worshippers filled the nave, kneeling before a crude effigy of their saint, a towering figure carved from debris and armored plating, visor painted in glowing green pigment. When Dravian entered, the singing faltered. He strode down the aisle, flanked by his acolytes. "A blasphemy," he muttered, almost to himself. "A primitive minds building idols before truth can speak." Malshan approached, incense swinging from his hand, eyes wide with reverence. "Inquisitor Dravian," he said, bowing, "you arrive blessed by fate. Yapalea, you arrive blessed by fate. Surely even you can see his will in this miracle. The Emperor has chosen his vessel." Dravian's reply was cold. "The Emperor chooses no vessel without sanction. I will see this miracle for myself." The confessor's confidence faltered as Dravian's gaze turned toward the catacombs below. "He rests beneath the reliquary," Malshan murmured. "He does not speak, he only listens." "Then let him listen to me." They found Doomguy where the priest had said, kneeling before the remnants of a shattered statue, his armor dim beneath the flickering torchlight. He didn't rise when they entered. The Inquisitor's servo skull hovered closer, scanning him with a lattice of red light. Data streamed across Dravian's wrist display, energy readings spiking off the chart, physiological patterns unreadable. Dravian spoke, his tone sharp. "You stand on Imperial soil. You will identify yourself." No answer. The Inquisitor circled him slowly. "Your armor is not of any known forge. Its systems are self-repairing beyond Mechanicus understanding. You carry weapons sanctified in no creed. And yet you fight as though the Emperor himself guides your hand. I ask again, what are you? What are you?" The visor turned toward him. For a moment the light within it flared brighter, reflecting in Dravian's pale eyes. The Inquisitor felt it then, a presence pressing against his mind, not like psychic intrusion, but something older, heavier, wordless. He staggered back, gripping his temples. The psyker screamed and collapsed, blood bursting from his ears. Dravian gasped for breath. Throne, what was that? Valen moved instinctively to help, but Doomguy was already standing. He turned away, heading deeper into the tunnels. Dravian's voice broke through the echo of footsteps. He's not bound to the warp. He destroys it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Malshan dropped to his knees, trembling. Then he is the Emperor's wrath made flesh. Dravian rose slowly, his expression unreadable. Or something the Emperor himself fears. Above them, alarms began to wail across the surface. The orcs were massing again, drawn by the psychic frenzy of the faithful. And somewhere beyond the clouds, the warp tier shuddered wider, bleeding crimson light across the night. Across the night, Dravian turned toward the sound, his voice low. Whatever that thing is, Colonel, it may save your world once more. But if it turns against us, I will burn this planet to its bones. In the shadows, Doomguy's silhouette disappeared into the dark, the hum of his armor fading like a heartbeat. Somewhere deep in the planet's veins, the coming war had already begun to stir. The first sound was a drumbeat. Faint at first, so low that it blended with the rumbling wind that swept through Kravenar's ruins. But then it grew, steady and deep, echoing through the ravines and valleys until it was more felt than heard. The sound carried the pulse of madness. Every thud was a heartbeat for something vast and alive. From orbit, Inquisitor Dravian's sensors mapped the storm forming across the planet's surface. Orc energy readings had spiked tenfold in less than a day. The green tide that had once scattered into chaos was converging again, marching not under leaders but under faith. Entire tribes had abandoned their war camps, drawn south by visions and dreams of a Burning Fist. The psychic field of their shared belief was distorting reality itself. The planet's atmosphere flickered with auroras of sickly green and yellow. The WAAAGH was not just reforming, it was awakening. Dravian stood before the hololith, its projections bathing the command chamber in sickly light. Every orc on this planet is moving toward a single location, he said, voice like steel scraping on stone. A pilgrimage of violence. This isn't a war anymore, it's worship. Colonel Valen leaned on the table, eyes hollow from sleepless nights. We've seen this before. Warlords rally their mobs, build idols, scream their gods' names until they destroy themselves. Dravian's pale gaze didn't waver. You don't understand. There is no warlord left. The idol they follow is him. The thing in the catacombs. Their chants reach into the warp. I can feel it. They're building something again. Something greater. Before Valen could reply, a Vox officer's voice crackled through the static. Incoming transmission from the southern front. You'll want to see this. The hololith flickered, displaying a grainy image from a recon servitor's feed. The camera shook under tremors as it captured a silhouette rising from the wastes, a structure of twisted metal bones and tanks fused together. Hundreds of orcs worked upon it, hammering and welding with crude joy. Smoke poured from its vents like incense from a forge. At its heart burned a furnace that wasn't fire, but raw psychic energy. They're making a new idol, Valen breathed. Dravian's jaw tightened. No, that isn't an idol. That's a weapon. Miles away, the roar of the orcs grew into a single, unending thunder. Doomguy walked through the ruins of what had been a manufactorum, his boots crunching glass and ash. The distant drums vibrated through the ground, through the bones of the dead, through the iron walls. The noise didn't irritate him. It focused him. It focused him. It was a call to battle, and battle was all he understood. He emerged from the factory's gates and looked toward the horizon. The sky pulsed with green lightning, flashes illuminating columns of orcs marching across the plains. Their banners were daubed with crude symbols, half orc glyphs, half depictions of him. The silent god they called him, the Burning Fist, the Humi who killed gods and didn't stop to talk about it. To Doomguy, their chanting was meaningless noise, but his instincts sharpened. The psychic resonance in the air was thick enough to feel. The Praetor suit's sensors flickered with warnings, streams of unreadable data scrolling across his visor. Warp radiation, energy flux, gravity distortion. The planet itself was bending under the strain of so much belief. Above him, Imperial aircraft screamed past Valkyries and Thunderbolts, racing toward the front line. Moments later, streaks of flame fell from the sky as Ork flak tore them apart. Doomguy watched the wreckage fall, the shadows of burning wings painting his visor in red light. Then he began to walk. Every step was a drumbeat of its own, echoing against the endless roar of the green tide. When he reached the edge of a ridge, he saw them. Tens of thousands of orcs filled the valley below, their fires stretching as far as the eye could see. The new idol towered above them, an obscene parody of his own form made of steel engines and corpses. Chains of skulls hung from its shoulders. Its face was carved in mockery of his visor, glowing with a sick green fire. A single orc stood upon its crown, arms outstretched, surrounded by weird boys wreathed in psychic lightning. His voice boomed like thunder across the wastes. "Hear me, boys, Gork and Mork are watchin'. They sent a burnin' fist to test us, furcha. And we'll prove we're the loudest, the fightiest, the meanest bunch in all the stars." The horde roared in agreement, weapons firing into the air. The psychic energy surged, shaking the ground beneath Doomguy's boots. The idol began to move, its massive frame awakening, powered not by machines but by the collective madness of the orcs themselves. Each shout, each laugh, each death fed the thing more power. In the command bastion, Dravian watched the readings spike. "They're breaching reality," he whispered. "They're shaping the warp with their will. If that thing reaches critical mass, it won't just destroy Krevenar, it'll bleed into the Imperium. The whole sector will drown in it." Valen turned to him. "Then what do we have left?" Dravian's eyes flicked to the data feed tracking a single moving heat signature racing toward the Orc host. "They weapon we barely understand, and if we can't stop this with faith," his lips tightened, "we'll stop it with fury." On the plains below, Doomguy broke into a sprint. The world blurred around him, his movements a blur of intent and momentum. He hit the first wave of orcs like a meteor, shotgun roaring, bodies bursting apart in sprays of green and black. The noise of the WAAAGH didn't falter, it only grew louder, feeding itself on the violence. Every orc that fell seemed to birth 10 more. The idol's eyes flared, beams of energy tearing trenches into the earth. Doomguy dove through explosions, reloading mid-motion, the chainsaw singing through the air. He reached the base of the monstrosity and began to climb, cutting through steel and flesh alike. In orbit, the Inquisitor's ship locked onto the surface, preparing bombardment coordinates. Dravian's voice crackled through the vox to Valen below. "If he fails, the planet dies." Better ash than corruption. Valen hesitated, staring at the hololith. The image of the silent warrior fighting beneath a sky of green fire filled the screen. "If he fails," he murmured, "we'll all be dead long before the bombardment hits." Lightning split the heavens, bathing the valley in emerald light. "The WAAAGH!" screamed in ecstasy. The idol roared as its engines ignited, beginning to rise. And through it all, one man climbed higher, wordless, relentless, a god of war lost among monsters, while above, the Inquisitor's hand hovered over the order that would end the world. The ground split beneath Doomguy's feet as the idol roared to life, its colossal limbs grinding with a chorus of shrieking metal. The air boiled with the heat of its psychic core, a heart made not of fire but of raw belief, pulsing in sync with the chants of thousands of orcs below. Each syllable of their guttural prayers sent ripples through reality, their collective madness forming an invisible storm that clawed at the edges of the warp. The idol was no mere machine. It was a god born of fury and iron, and it was waking. Doomguy scaled its flank, his armor scorched and dented, his every motion driven by unyielding momentum. He tore through riveted plates and ropey cables, each cut sending torrents of green energy screaming into the air. The Praetor suit's sensors blared constant warnings: temperature overloads, magnetic interference, warp flux instability, but he ignored them all. His focus was absolute. Every pulse of the creature's heart beneath his boots was a countdown. Below, the orc horde had lost all semblance of order. Some danced, others tore each other apart in ecstasy, their blood feeding the field that sustained their monstrous idol. The WAAAGH had become a hymn of annihilation. Through that din, Wasgrim's voice returned, amplified through vox horns mounted in the idol's chest. The weird boy's tone was half madness, half revelation. "Look at him, boys. Da Hume's climbing for Gork's throne. He wants to prove he's da biggest, da maddest, da loudest. Don't let I'm win. Give de an idol more." The orcs screamed louder, firing their weapons into the sky, releasing pure psychic energy with every pull of the trigger. Lightning bolts of green and red carved through the clouds, striking the idol and feeding its furnace. Its eyes burned brighter, casting twin suns of emerald fire across the plains. High above, Inquisitor Dravion watched the spectacle unfold from the command deck of his cruiser. Every reading defied understanding. The idol's energy output rivaled that of a small sun, its psychic signature visible across the void. "It's crossing thresholds I didn't think possible," he muttered. "They're not just shaping the warp, they're binding it." His aide hesitated. "Should we prepare exterminators?" Dravian's hands tightened on the railing. Not yet. That thing is a conduit. Destroy it too soon and we might tear the warp open entirely. We wait for the weapon to reach the core. If he fails, his eyes narrowed, then we cleanse everything. Then we cleanse everything. On the surface, Doomguy reached the creature's shoulder, where the armor plating gave way to a mass of biological tissue fused with iron. Veins of molten copper pulsed under its skin, leaking ichor that sizzled where it hit the ground. Embedded within its flesh were the remnants of vehicles, tanks, and even corpses, Imperial soldiers, orcs, and something else, something that twitched and whispered even in death. The air stank of burning oil and blood. He drew the super shotgun, blasting apart a vent of green flame that belched psychic smoke. The creature staggered but did not fall. A massive hand swung toward him, forged from steel girders and bone. He leapt aside as it smashed into the ground, sending shockwaves through the wasteland. The orcs below howled with laughter. Doomguy landed hard, rolled, and fired again, tearing through sinew and metal alike. The creature bellowed, a sound that was not mechanical but living, deep and mournful, as if aware of its own suffering. For the first time the WAAAGH faltered. The psychic field wavered. Doomguy seized the opening, sprinting across the creature's shoulder toward its spine. His visor's display flickered. The Praetor's suit detected something ahead, a massive energy node buried deep beneath the plating. The core. He holstered the shotgun and drew the chainsaw. Its roar was swallowed by the thunder around him, yet its vibration was steady, eager. The weapon's teeth ignited with sparks as he drove it into the idol's back. Steel screamed, flesh tore. The orcs below shrieked in both awe and terror as their god bled rivers of molten light. Green fire cascaded across its body, devouring its arms, its legs, its face. The psychic backlash rolled through the valley, melting sand into glass. Inside the command bastion, Colonel Valen shielded his eyes from the blinding flare. "Emperor, help us," he whispered. "He's cutting it apart." Vroth. Dravian's voice crackled over the vox, cold and calm. "No, he's unmaking it." The idol convulsed, trying to hold itself together. Its inner core, a globe of warp-touched energy, pulsed faster, destabilizing with every stroke of Doomguy's blade. The air itself fractured, shards of unreality spiraling outward. He ripped through the final layer, revealing the heart, a writhing sphere of green and red light, a fusion of belief, matter, and madness. For a moment, Doomguy stared into it, and saw nothing. No god, no soul, no thought, just chaos. He reached into the furnace. The heat would have incinerated anything mortal, but the Praetor's suit held. His hand closed around the core, and he crushed it. The world exploded. A shockwave tore across Kravenar 4, flattening mountains and shattering what remained of its cities. The sky turned white, then black as the energy of the WAAAGH imploded inward. Orcs screamed as their psychic links shattered, their laughter replaced by confusion and dread. The idol's body collapsed in on itself, folding like paper, consumed by the fire it had birthed. When the light faded, Doomguy stood at the epicenter, his armor smoking, his visor dim but unbroken. Around him lay the remains of the god machine, a vast graveyard of melted metal and bone. In orbit, Dravian watched the readings plummet. The psychic storm dissipated, replaced by an eerie stillness. "It's over," he said quietly, but the psyker beside him, trembling and pale, shook his head. "No," he whispered, "not over." Something else heard them. "The warp remembers." Below, Doomguy looked toward the horizon. The wind carried the scent of ash and silence. For the first time since his arrival, the orcs were quiet. Yet above the ruins, faint streaks of red light began to swirl within the clouds, like veins opening in the sky. The crucible had ended, but something greater had begun. The firestorm over Kravenar 4 raged for hours, a rolling sea of ash and lightning that devoured everything it touched. When at last the winds calmed, the sky remained a bruised red, streaked with faint traces of green, a wound in the firmament that refused to heal. The idol was gone. The orcs scattered or dead, yet the world felt no lighter. The silence that followed was not victory, it was the breath before the next strike. In orbit, the inquisitorial vessel Judicium Mortis hung above the planet like a blade poised for execution. Within its sanctum chamber, Inquisitor Dravian stood before the great viewport, watching Kravenar's surface flicker with the ghosts of the storm. He had seen exterminations before, worlds burned to ash for far less than this, but this time, his certainty faltered. Doomguy still walked among the living, and that alone made every calculation dangerous. The psyker knelt beside the data altar, his body trembling. He's still down there, he murmured, his voice dry as sand. The one who silenced the WAAAGH, the one who burns the warp. I can feel the hole he left in it. It's unnatural. Dravian did not turn. Unnatural is why we exist. The warp recoils from him, my lord, the psyker continued. A like prey before a predator. He is no saint, no servant of the Emperor. Mutu. He is. The Inquisitor raised a hand, and the psyker fell silent. Enough. I know what he is not. What I must learn now is what he serves. Moments later, the chamber doors hissed open, and Colonel Valen entered, his face lined by exhaustion and soot. You ordered orbital silence, he said, stepping forward. Yet my men report fleet movements. You're preparing bombardment. Dravian's gaze stayed on the viewport. Your planet is fractured beyond salvation. The warp breach grows again, feeding on the psychic residue of that idol's death. If it widens, this entire system will be consumed. I cannot allow that risk. Valen's voice hardened. You'll kill billions, civilians wounded, the faithful who still hold the line. We can contain it. He contained it. Dravian turned slowly, his pale eyes meeting the colonel's. You think that creature contained anything? It slaughtered an army, annihilated a god machine, and unmade a psychic construct the size of a city. It did not save you. It reset the board. He stepped closer, his shadow cutting through the dim light. Tell me, Colonel, how long before the Orcs return, before chaos sensed the wound left behind? He is no savior. He's the spark that keeps the fire alive. Valen's hand twitched toward his sidearm, then stopped. You can't just erase what he's done. I can, Dravian said softly. And I will. He turned to the servo skull hovering near the command console. Initiate the exterminatus sequence. Target planetary coordinates for atmosphere ignition. The skull beeped, rotating its lenses toward the Inquisitor in silent confirmation. Red sigils flared across the control altar. The ship's machine spirits awoke with a deep, mechanical moan. Valen lunged forward, slamming his hand down on the console. You'll kill him. Dravian's expression remained unchanged. If it ensures the Emperor's realm endures, then I'll burn 1,000 like him. The colonel's voice was low, tight with desperation. Then you've already become what he fights against. For a moment, the silence between them was absolute. Then the vox crackled to life, distorted by interference. A voice faint, metallic, and broken by static, cut through. This is ground command. Emperor's mercy, the sky. It's bleeding. It's bleeding. We've got atmospheric fractures forming over the equatorial ridge. Something's coming through. Dravion froze. Through. Not from the warp breach, the voice stammered. It's forming above it, like it's being pulled open from the other side. The psyker screamed. The lights dimmed. The lights dimmed. The ship shook as every sensor spiked into overdrive. It's reacting, he cried. Whatever he destroyed, the energy didn't die, it moved. The breach isn't collapsing, it's focusing. Outside, crimson lightning tore through the clouds, converging over the ruins where Doomguy stood. The energy twisted into a vortex, glowing brighter until it formed a sphere of burning light that crackled with impossible geometry. Within it, shapes flickered. Blades, wings, horns, 1,000 eyes opening and closing in silent rhythm. Dravian watched in awe and dread. That's not the warp. Valen's voice was barely audible. Then what is it? Below, the storm reached its apex. Doomguy stood unmoving at its center, his armor bathed in the reflection of the swirling light. The earth trembled beneath him, fissures spreading outward like veins of molten gold. His visor flared, displaying warnings in a dozen ancient tongues. The Praetor suit's internal AI spoke only once, in a voice like static and thunder. Dimensional instability detected. Origin unknown. Containment required. He didn't hesitate. Doomguy stepped toward the storm, his boots crushing glass and bone alike. Every instinct screamed that this was the true source, the real enemy that had been watching since the moment he arrived. He could feel it beyond the veil, something vast and hungry, something that recognized him. In orbit, Dravian clenched his fists. A target the storm. Fire on my command. Valen's eyes widened. He's going in there. If you fire now, he's leading it. Dravian barked. That thing responds to him. If he merges with it, we'll never stop it. Valen grabbed the Inquisitor's wrist before he could issue the order. And if you're wrong? Dravian stared back at him, fury and fear warring behind his eyes. Then I gamble everything on one truth. No man can carry that much power and remain human. Below, Doomguy vanished into the light. Doomguy. The vortex folded inward, devouring itself, shrinking until only a single pulse of white fire marked where he had stood. The sky went still, the breach sealed. The world was quiet once more. Dravian lowered his hand. "The ceasefire," he ordered, voice shaking. Valen exhaled, his shoulders trembling. "You hesitated." Dravian didn't look at him. "No," he said softly. He chose. Outside, the planet turned beneath them, silent, scarred, and waiting for what would rise next. The light that swallowed Doomguy did not fade. It fractured. What remained of Kravenar's skies rippled like glass struck by a hammer, shards of reality twisting and folding inward as the vortex collapsed. For a heartbeat, the entire planet seemed to hold its breath. Then came the sound, low at first, then rising, a deep resonant thrum that echoed through every structure, every soul. It was not the roar of a storm, but the heartbeat of something vast and awakening. In orbit, the Judicium Mortis shuddered. Red alarms bathed the bridge in harsh light. Vox screams flooded the channels, crewmen reciting half-remembered prayers, the Psyker convulsing where he knelt in the corner. Dravion gripped the railing, his knuckles white. A status, the Tech Adept's voice trembled, a gravitic anomalies expanding from the equatorial breach. No readings of life from the surface. Wait. Correction, multiple signatures reappearing, thousands, no, millions. Warp echoes overlapping reality. Impossible, Valen said, his voice hoarse. The breach was sealed. Sealed, Dravion murmured, or devoured. Below, the earth split anew. Rivers of molten soil bled through the cracks, glowing crimson under the darkening sky. The air had turned heavy, alive, whispering in languages older than men or gods. From the ruins of the idol's crater, tendrils of shadow rose, coiling like smoke yet moving with purpose. They reached skyward, clawing toward the void, and within their center, something moved. A figure stepped through the veil, its outline distorted by the warping air. For a moment it looked human, then monstrous, then nothing at all. The world seemed to bend around it, unable to decide what shape it should hold. The orcs that still lived, broken, leaderless, crawling through the wreckage, looked upon it and howled in terror. Their minds, built for simple violence, could not comprehend what they saw. Some tore at their faces. Others fell to their knees, babbling prayers to both Gork and Mork, though even those gods seemed silent now. The figure descended onto the scorched plains, its impact splitting the ground. The dust cleared. It was Doomguy, or what remained of him. The praetor suit was blackened, its edges glowing faintly as if still cooling from celestial fire. The visor no longer burned green, but a deep, molten red. Symbols of unknown origin flickered across its surface, shifting like living script. The man within did not move, yet every creature in range felt his presence crawl beneath their skin. The warp wound pulsed in response. Above, the rift yawned open once more, larger than before. This time, it did not lead into chaos, but from it. Shapes stirred within the depths, massive, winged, crowned in flame. Dravion recognized the pattern instantly. "A corn," he whispered. "The blood god stirs." The Psyker screamed, his chains rattling violently. He hears him. The butcher of 1,000 wars, the warp itself remembers his rage. Dravion's gaze fixed on the surface, where Doomguy stood beneath the crimson light. "You mean the warp fears him?" "No," the Psyker gasped. "It hungers for him." The truth was visible now, a spectacle of madness made manifest. From the rift poured rivers of blood, not liquid, but the psychic essence of slaughter itself, a tide of crimson energy cascading down to the surface. The dead stirred in its wake, flesh sloughing from bone, eyes glowing with the reflection of the never-ending battle that existed beyond the veil. Every drop of blood spilled on Kravenar, orc, human, demon, fed the breach. In the midst of it all, Doomguy began to move. Each step sent tremors through the ground. The praetor suit's systems rebooted, runes flickering back to green for an instant before vanishing. Data streams rolled across his visor, identifying threats by the hundreds. He did not hesitate. He ran toward the rising tide. Bolter fire echoed across the ruins as the remaining Imperial Guard, scattered and terrified, tried to hold their lines. Their shots meant nothing. The blood forms that emerged from the rift were not flesh. They were hunger given shape, blades and teeth made from psychic fury. They devoured men whole, leaving only red mist where soldiers had stood. Valen's voice broke through the static. "We have to pull out. There's nothing left to fight for." Dravion ignored him, his eyes locked on the figure below. "He's moving toward the rift." Valen turned sharply. "You can't mean he's not fleeing it," Dravion interrupted. "He's going in." On the surface, Doomguy charged into the crimson tide. Demons surged to meet him, their roars merging into a single monstrous chant. A bloodletter lunged, blade raised high. but its arm was gone before it struck, torn clean off by the chainsaw's scream. Another came from behind. A shotgun blast reduced it to vapor. He fought like a machine made from fury, every motion precise, every strike final. The demons multiplied. For every one that fell, 2 more crawled from the breach, drawn by the resonance of his violence. The air around him shimmered as warp energy surged. He was fighting on 2 planes now, body and spirit, flesh and faith. The line between reality and nightmare blurred until there was no difference at all. Dravian watched in silence. "He's feeding it," he whispered. "Every kill fuels the rift. Every act of slaughter deepens its hunger." Valen's voice cracked. "Then call the strike. End it now." Dravian's hand hovered over the activation rune, but he couldn't press it. The sight below held him frozen. Doomguy was reaching the rift, his armor breaking apart piece by piece, light spilling from every fracture. He raised his chainsaw one final time and drove it into the heart of the breach. For a second, the world went silent. Then the scream began, so deep it couldn't be heard, only felt. The sky tore itself apart as the rift collapsed inward, dragging everything toward it. Air, debris, flame, corpses, even light itself. The inquisitorial ship's stabilizers failed. Alarms screamed as gravitational tides pulled at its hull. "A disengage orbit," Dravian shouted. "Now!" But Valen wasn't listening. He was staring at the surface where the light had swallowed everything, and where, for an instant, he swore he saw Doomguy standing in the center of the storm, holding the rift shut with his own hands as it devoured him. Then Kravenar fell silent once more. The warp was sealed. The storm was gone. But the stars above the world burned red, and far beyond the veil something laughed, a sound of approval, of hunger unsated. The warp had taken him, and now it wanted more. There was no light, no horizon, only the red. It bled through everything, an endless ocean of boiling haze and shifting silhouettes. Doomguy stood within it, or perhaps was it, his form dissolving and reforming with every pulse of this new impossible world. He could no longer tell where his armor ended and the realm began. His visor flickered between reality and nightmare. The readouts fractured into streams of static symbols that spoke in the tongue of war. He had crossed the veil. The air burned like iron, thick with the metallic scent of blood. Mountains made of bone and brass stretched into a sky of perpetual fire. Bendu. The ground was slick, pulsing like flesh beneath his boots. Rivers of crimson light flowed in impossible directions, defying gravity and sanity alike. From every direction came the roar of distant battles, clashing steel, and the eternal chanting of unseen legions. He had been here before, some version of here, some echo, but this was no hell he had known. This was organized, purposeful. The slaughter had hierarchy. And then the voice came. "Another trespasser in my dominion. Another trespasser in my dominion." It was not a sound, but a vibration that shook the world itself, the syllables etched into the fabric of the air. The blood rivers froze mid-flow, as though listening. From the horizon, a figure approached, massive, horned, its steps leaving craters in molten earth. Every movement exhaled fire. His armor was forged from the bones of gods, his axe a mountain of steel, etched with runes that wept blood. His laughter rolled across the plains like thunder. Khorne, the blood god. Lord of skulls, the first of slaughter and the last of mercy. "Your fury calls to me," the god said, each word trembling through the ground. "Your hands have spilled oceans in my name, though you never prayed for it. You are wrath made flesh, a hymn of violence without creed. Even my demons whisper your name with reverence." Doomguy's chainsaw hissed as it came to life. The sound was small in comparison to the god's voice, but pure, defiance distilled into motion. He said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Khorne laughed. "Still you deny the throne offered to you. You could stand beside me, rule with me. You have slaughtered demons and mortals alike. You have undone the spawn of chaos and those who worship them. You are kin to destruction." The slayer moved forward, slow but relentless. His visor's glow cut through the crimson mist, each step echoing like a challenge. "You think you fight against the warp," Khorne continued, "but you are its instrument. Every blow you strike feeds me. Every scream you silence is my praise. You have fought all gods, yet you fulfill the creed of one you lived to kill." The ground trembled as the blood god raised his axe, its blade the size of a fortress. "Then fight me, mortal. Let me taste the rage that denies its father." Doomguy charged. The first clash split the plain in two. The chainsaw met the god's axe in a shower of sparks and blood. The shockwave leveled the mountains around them, vaporizing rivers and turning bone to ash. Khorne laughed as the slayer leapt onto his weapon. tearing a path up the half toward his face. The god swatted him aside with a backhand that shattered rock and sent Doomguy crashing through a canyon wall. The armor cracked, alarmed, screaming, but the man beneath did not fall. He rose, smoke pouring from his chest plate, and ran again. He fired his shotgun mid-sprint, each shell a thunderclap that cratered the god's chest plate. Khorne stumbled, roaring in delight. Yes, show me the rage that mocks death. Doomguy leapt, driving his chainsaw into the wound. The blade bit deep, spilling molten ichor that hissed and burned his armor. Khorne seized him by the torso, lifting him skyward like a toy. "You are strong," the god growled, "but strength without purpose is mine." He slammed Doomguy into the ground hard enough to split the world open. Lava and blood surged upward, swallowing them both in a storm of flame. Still, the Slayer clawed his way free, dragging himself through molten rivers until he stood again. His visor's glow cut through the smoke. His breathing was calm, measured, unstoppable. Khorne's laughter turned to a growl. "You will not yield." Doomguy raised his weapon in answer. The blood god swung his axe once more. The impact sent shards of red lightning across the horizon, burning the sky itself. The Slayer dodged beneath the arc, fired a plasma burst, and lunged for the god's knee, slicing deep into tendon and armor. Khorne roared, staggering as Doomguy climbed the god's arm, firing, slashing, tearing without pause. The chainsaw's teeth screamed against divine flesh. The god caught him again, pinning him against his own chest. "You defy eternity." Doomguy drove his gauntlet blade straight into the god's throat. The wound erupted in light. Khorne dropped him, clutching at his neck, ichor pouring in rivers of fire. His laughter turned to something strange. Admiration. "You would kill even me, wouldn't you?" Doomguy said nothing. He stepped back, blood and ash coating his armor, the chainsaw sputtering as it cooled. The blood god's voice rumbled across the endless plain. "Then take my gift, Slayer. You have earned what none before could claim. My blessing is not servitude. It is acknowledgement. You will never fall. You will never rest. For every world you purge, every demon you destroy, every god you slay, you feed the eternal war. You are the war." He lowered his massive head, eyes burning like suns. "And now go. The galaxy still bleeds. Feed it." The red light engulfed everything. When it faded, Doomguy was gone. The blood god stood alone amid his ruined realm, grinning through the rivers of his own blood. "There is no peace," he whispered to the void. "Only slaughter eternal." And far away, back in the material realm, on the shattered surface of Kravenar 4, a crater glowed with fresh fire. The Praetor armor stood at its center, upright, undamaged, its visor burning crimson. The air trembled around it. The war was not over. It had simply changed hands. The world lay broken beneath a sky that no longer bled. Kravenar 4, once a battlefield of madness and faith, was quiet at last. The fires had burned themselves out, leaving only drifting ash that fell like snow upon fields of bone. The silence was not peace, it was aftermath. The kind that lingers after something vast and incomprehensible has passed through and left nothing behind to explain it. The crater where Doomguy had returned was now a monument to stillness. His armor stood amid the ruin, smoke curling faintly from its vents. The visor glowed dimly, no longer red nor green, but a muted amber that pulsed with the rhythm of a fading heartbeat. Around him stretched the remains of the Ork horde, corpses hardened into black stone, frozen mid-motion as if time itself had turned its wrath upon them. Their god-idols lay shattered, their banners scorched into dust. Above, the clouds swirled lazily, their crimson hue replaced by a dull gray. The warp had retreated, or perhaps simply grown tired. In orbit, the Judicium Mortis hung motionless. Its augurs detected no psychic resonance, no signs of life below. The world appeared dead. Yet Inquisitor Dravian could not look away from the faint light flickering in the crater, like the heartbeat of a god refusing to die. Colonel Valen stood beside him at the viewport. His uniform was torn, his eyes bloodshot. He had aged years in days. "You said the warp breach was sealed," he murmured. "Oh, but it feels like it's still here, like it's watching." Dravian's reflection in the glass looked like a corpse. "It's not the warp that watches," he said quietly. "It's him." Valen turned sharply. "Then we bring him in, study him. Maybe he can still be reasoned with." Dravian's gaze didn't move. "Reasoned with? Colonel, you saw what he did to a god. What would you reason with? His purpose? His mercy? He has neither. He's the Emperor's nightmare made flesh, a weapon without a leash." "And yet," Valen said, voice hardening, "he saved us. Whatever he is, whatever made him, he ended the war. Close the rift, stop the warp from swallowing this world. You'd call that heresy? The Inquisitor's lips twitched in something almost like pity. No, I'd call it an inevitability. Below, the figure in the crater moved, slowly. Dust shifted as Doomguy raised his head to the sky. His armor was pitted with cracks, faint veins of red light still glowing within. He took one step, then another, each impact echoing like thunder across the empty plains. The suit's internal servos whined softly, recalibrating from the strain of impossible endurance. His breathing was steady, mechanical, eternal. Somewhere deep in the catacombs of the ruined basilica, Confessor Malcian lived still, half mad and blind. He had taken refuge beneath the altar after the storm of blood. When he emerged, he found the city gone and the heavens silent. Yet when he looked toward the horizon and saw the glowing figure walking through the dust, he fell to his knees. "A saint of fury," he whispered, voice breaking with awe and terror. "He rises again. The Emperor's wrath endures." His words carried far through Vox echoes, through the remnants of faithful who had survived underground, through the terrified few who still drew breath on this dead world. Within hours, whispers became hymns. Across broken Vox networks, the chant began to spread once more. The saint walks. The saint endures. Dravian heard the first transmissions on the bridge of his ship. His jaw tightened. "Cut the channels. They're broadcasting planet-wide," the Vox officer said. "We can't suppress all frequencies." "Then burn them," the Inquisitor said coldly. "If the people will not forget their miracle, I will erase the witnesses." Valen stepped forward, his voice low. "You'd kill them, after everything. That's not faith, Dravian. That's fear." Dravian turned, his eyes cold as iron. "Faith is the weapon that keeps the Imperium alive. Fear is the cost. If that creature becomes their god, he'll do what no demon ever could. He'll unite them." He leaned close enough for Valen to see the exhaustion behind his eyes. "And if that happens, we lose the galaxy to his silence." Before Valen could respond, the Vox chimed again, this time with a tone neither human nor machine. The sound came not from the calms, but from the world below, a single frequency, low and constant, resonating through the ship's hull. It was not communication, but intent. Dravian froze. "Mazus." "What is that?" The tech priest's voice faltered. "It's coming from the surface. The signals pattern matches heartbeats. One, singular, increasing amplitude." Valen looked to the viewport just as the faint amber glow in the crater brightened, spreading outward in expanding rings of light. The surface dust lifted in concentric waves, forming ripples across the planet like the pulse of a living heart. Doomguy stood at the epicenter, unmoving. The pulse intensified. Dravian's eyes widened. He's reawakening the field, but not the warps, his own. The light reached the horizon. Instruments failed. Energy levels spiked beyond comprehension. For a single blinding moment, the world of Kravenor 4 shone brighter than any sun. Then silence. When the light faded, the planet was whole again, scoured clean. The wreckage was gone, the scars erased. In its place stood plains of black stone carved smooth by heat so intense it had remade the surface. At the center of it all, Doomguy remained, alone, standing beneath a sky newly born. Dravian stared at the readings in disbelief. "He remade it," Valen whispered, "a not remade, purged." Neither man spoke again. The ship hung above the silent world, its augers unable to penetrate the surface. The signal had stopped. The saint had vanished from all senses as though he had never existed at all. But deep within the void, beyond the veil of time and matter, a new heartbeat echoed through the immaterium, steady, relentless, eternal. The warp knew it. The gods felt it. And for the first time in an age they hesitated. The silence before the end had begun. The surface of Kravenor 4 was silent once more. Yet that silence felt heavy, like the pause between two breaths in the lungs of a dying god. The blackened plains stretched endlessly beneath a dim and starless sky. Not even the wind dared move. The air was thick with the memory of fire, and somewhere within that stillness the figure of Doomguy remained motionless, solitary, a monument to everything that had been destroyed. His armor, scorched but unbroken, stood amid the glassed earth like the last echo of a forgotten war. Above the world, the Judicium Mortis orbited cautiously. No readings of life or movement registered on its sensors, yet the ship's auspex arrays trembled with distortion. Inquisitor Dravian stood at the main viewport, his reflection fractured by static. Behind him, the Psyker muttered prayers that melted into nonsense. "He is gone," the Inquisitor said, though the words felt false even as he spoke them. Colonel Valen's voice was quiet. And yet, the instruments still hum. The air sings like it remembers him. Dravion's gaze stayed fixed on the dark sphere below. The warp remembers everything. The question is, does it fear him or obey him? Before Valen could respond, the ship's lumen lights flickered. A low vibration rolled through the decks, so deep it made the bones of the crew ache. Systems flared to life unbidden, Vox relays opening on every frequency. From the static came a voice, faint at first, then rising, filling every corridor, every heart. It was not human. It was vast. It was the Emperor. "A children of my realm," the voice said, not in sound but in presence, a resonance that bypassed ears and burrowed into the soul. "You stand at the edge of the abyss, the veil trembles. The storm remembers its master." Dravion froze, breath caught in his throat. He had heard tales of the Emperor's voice transmitted through astropaths or relic machines, but never like this. It was not heard. It was felt, like the weight of a star pressing down on the mind. The Psyker screamed, collapsing to his knees as his bindings glowed white-hot. The voice continued, soft but absolute. "He who walks in silence has carried wrath where I could not. He has done what faith alone could never achieve. Through him the warp has been reminded of fear." Volan's eyes widened. "He's speaking of the Slayer?" Dravion whispered, and no, he's speaking to him. On the planet below, Doomguy stirred. The faint pulse within his armor flared brighter. His visor, once dim, blazed gold. The wind returned in a single whisper, carrying dust across the plains. The sound of the Emperor's voice resonated within the armor's systems, the Praetor's suit glowing as if answering an ancient command. "You are not of my design," the voice said, reverberating across the landscape, across the stars themselves. "Yet your fury has become a weapon of my will. You have destroyed where I could not, silenced where I could only speak. You stand outside my light, yet you guard its flame." The words rippled through Doomguy's mind, but he gave no sign of hearing. His fists clenched. Every scar upon his armor shimmered faintly, healed by an unseen force. The earth beneath him cracked, and light began to seep upward. Pure, radiant light, not the sickly glow of the warp, but something older, sacred, alive. From orbit, the planet began to shine. Sensors overloaded. Dravion staggered back from the viewport as the image filled with golden brilliance. "Or by the throne," he whispered, "it's the Astronomicon." Valen stared in disbelief. "That's impossible. The beacon's in terror. Nothing can replicate." "It's not replication," Dravion said. His voice trembled. "It's reflection. It's reflection." Below, Doomguy lifted his gaze. The sky split open, not into warp fire or chaos, but into light, endless and pure. Through that light, a silhouette formed colossal, draped in radiant armor, crowned in sunfire. The figure had no face, no features, only presence. It was the Emperor, but not as a man, rather as the sum of humanity's will made divine. For the first time since his arrival in this universe, Doomguy paused. He had faced gods, demons, entire legions of things beyond reason, yet this presence did not invite combat. It did not threaten. It simply was. "Your rage is not sin," the voice said. "It is the tool by which creation defends itself, but even wrath must kneel before purpose. You were not born to conquer the Warp Slayer. You were born to remind it that it can die." The golden light swelled until the world vanished within it. Every system on the Judicium Mortis went dark. Every heart aboard stopped for a single, impossible instant. Then silence. When vision returned, Krevinar was gone. In its place hung only fragments of stone drifting through the void, glowing faintly with gold. No explosion, no debris, simply absence, as though the planet had been rewritten out of existence. Valen's voice was barely a whisper. He erased it. Dravion's hand trembled against the glass. No, he purified it. Far below, beyond sight and reason, within the endless corridors of the warp, a single spark of gold drifted through crimson darkness. It pulsed once, steady and unbroken. The voice of the Emperor lingered one last time, faint but clear. "The work is not done." And then the light was gone. The void was silent where Krevinar had once hung. No debris, no radiation, not even the faint signature of a dying world remained. Only the memory of light lingered, suspended in the dark like the afterimage of a dying star. The Judicium Mortis drifted at the edge of that absence, its crew whispering prayers through cracked vox channels, afraid to raise their voices above a whisper, as if the silence itself were sacred. Inquisitor Dravion stood at the viewport, his reflection fractured by faint motes of residual gold. He could feel it still, the echo of the Emperor's voice, the vibration in his bones, the impossible truth that what had happened below was not destruction but transformation. Yet no one could explain it. No auspex could measure the power that had passed through this sector. The Mechanicus priests spoke of divine interference. The Psychers called it ascension. Dravian called it something else entirely. Judgment. Colonel Valen approached, his boots heavy on the deck. "A fleet command demands a report," he said quietly. "They want to know what happened to the planet, to the artifact, to him." Dravian didn't turn. "Tell them the world was purged by order of the Inquisition." Valen frowned. "You'd erase it, even after what we saw." "What we saw," Dravian said, his voice low, "was not meant for men to record. If we write this truth, it will become belief. And belief, Colonel, is the seed of heresy." Valen's eyes hardened. "And yet belief saved us. Without him we'd all be dead." Dravian looked at him finally. There was no anger in his gaze, only the exhaustion of a man who had seen too much. "You think he saved you out of mercy? No, Colonel. He fought because fighting is all he knows. It's all he is. Even gods have purpose, but that thing, he makes purpose through annihilation. That is not salvation." "It is correction." Valen didn't reply. Outside, the stars seemed dimmer, their light swallowed by the void. The ship's engines hummed softly, a fragile thread of life in the cold expanse. Then faintly, the auspex beeped once, then again. The tech priest turned from his console, his voice a mix of confusion and awe. "Detection, anomaly in the outer rim of the system. Single energy source. Stable." Dravian's pulse quickened. A display, the holographic map flared to life, revealing a faint beacon moving through the void. Not debris, not a ship. Just a single object traveling steadily against the pull of gravity. It emitted no radio signal, no warp trace, only a pulse, rhythmic and deliberate. The pattern was unmistakable, a heartbeat. Valen's breath caught. "It's him." "Impossible," Dravian said, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. "No being could survive what happened to that world." The tech priest's mechadendrites clicked nervously. "The signal is not human, not mechanical. It is something else. A fusion of both." The Inquisitor stared into the hologram. The pulse grew stronger, steadier, until it drowned out every other sound on the bridge. It was not the rhythm of life, but of momentum, something relentless, eternal. "Track it," Dravian ordered. "Where is it going?" The servitors worked in silence. Coordinates appeared on the screen, numbers cascading down in streams of binary. The location was outside Imperial borders, beyond the Eye of Terror, deeper into the abyss where no light reached. "Into the warp," Valen whispered. "He's going back." Dravian exhaled slowly. "He's not going back. He's continuing." The words felt heavy, final. He turned away from the viewport and walked toward the command DS. His acolytes watched him carefully as he keyed in a secure transmission. To the Lords of Terror, he dictated, his tone clipped and precise. "A subject, Krevena 4, incident resolved. Planet rendered inert by divine anomaly. Recommend interdiction of the sector. No further expeditions authorized." He paused before ending the recording, his eyes flicking once more to the golden light still faintly shimmering at the edge of the void. And one more note, he added quietly. "The being known as the Silent Saint appears again. Do not attempt contact, pray." He closed the channel. Outside, the void stirred. The faint golden light that had lingered began to stretch, twisting into thin threads that shimmered and broke apart. Then from the darkness something moved, a shape vast and distant, yet unmistakably humanoid. It carried no banners, bore no symbols. Its armor glowed dimly, the same hue as dying embers. It walked not through space, but into it, step by step, each motion tearing faint scars of light in the fabric of the void. Doomguy had not died, he had not ascended, he had simply continued. The void around him rippled as he moved, reacting to his presence. Behind him faint echoes followed, shadows of the worlds he had saved and destroyed alike. They whispered not in words but in emotion, rage, defiance, faith, fear. He heard none of it. There was no purpose, no commandment, no divine voice guiding him now. There was only the task that had always been his, to destroy the corruption that threatened life, wherever it hid, in whatever form it took. Ahead lay the Eye of Terror, a wound in reality that burned brighter than any star. It pulsed with crimson light, each heartbeat echoing across eternity. Within it, the legions of chaos waged their endless war. Demons screamed, titans clashed, the very laws of existence bent under the weight of madness. The Slayer walked toward it. He felt the pull of the warp's hatred. its hunger clawing at him, whispering promises in the voices of 1,000 damned souls. It told him he belonged there, that his fury was born of it, that he was its child. He answered not with words but with motion, his gauntlet tightening, his shotgun reloading, the chainsaw growling softly at his side. When he reached the edge of the eye, he did not hesitate. The warp flared in defiance, lightning arcing across the void as if the gods themselves sought to bar his passage, but he stepped forward unshaken, his figure swallowed by the storm. From the bridge of the Judicium Mortis, Dravian watched the golden flicker vanish into the crimson maw, Sonar. "The Emperor preserve us," he whispered. Valen stood beside him, his voice barely audible. "Maybe he already has." The Inquisitor didn't reply. He turned away as the ship's engines ignited, setting course for Imperial space. Behind them, the void shimmered, faint ripples spreading from where the Slayer had entered the warp. For a long time there was nothing. Then, somewhere deep within the Imperium, a sound began, a roar that was not rage but purpose, echoing through the screaming tides of eternity. It was a promise carved into the heart of chaos itself. The crusade would never end, and in the darkness between worlds, the Slayer marched on.